Do you think much about the distinction between guilt and shame and sort of like how that relates to forgiveness?
With guilt, we're disappointed in what we've done, not necessarily in who we are. When we are shameful, we are ashamed of who we are, right? It's kind of an assessment of who we take ourselves to be. If you are, have a kind of negative response based on who you are, then there's no way out of that, right? Because you've already accepted who you are. You already have this kind of view of, I'm a horrible person, I'm a bad person.
Welcome to the gray area. My guest today is our returning champion, Myisha Cherry. She's a previous guest on the show, and she has kindly decided to return. She is a professor of philosophy at UC Riverside, where she studies, among other things, the moral psychology of anger, empathy, forgiveness, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. That is how I describe who you are and what you do. How do you describe who you are and what you do when you're at those fancy philosophy parties?
No, I'm a philosopher. I not only do it for a living, but it's just who I am. That's how I see the world. That's how I view the world. But also do public stuff. So I'm interested not only in just teaching in the academy, but also sharing all these thoughts that I come up with public audiences. So that's why I'm so happy to be with you again today.
Why the interest in forgiveness? Like, why did that feel like something that like you actually wanted to study seriously, philosophically?
Yeah. I mean, there's a variety of reasons, personally and interpersonally. I would say that I got interested in anger first. And forgiveness is kind of like that connected to anger, particularly because people think that forgiveness is the letting go of anger. And because I'm just pro-anger, of course, I'm going to think, kind of disagree with that particular view and try to correct people about what forgiveness is and what it isn't. But also, historically, the church shooting in Charleston really kind of inspired me to really kind of think about what forgiveness is. I felt that people were reading the victim's forgiveness of a white supremacist in a courtroom very wrongly. The questions that was being asked in press conferences after the police shooting of Black men during Black Lives Matter, this question of, can you find it in your heart to give? Can you find it in your heart to forgive? All this rhetoric about forgiveness in ways that I felt that people were just getting it wrong. They were having too much hopes in it. They were putting too much pressure on victims to do it. And so I was just trying to figure out, why are people so interested in forgiveness? Why are people mentioning forgiveness so much? Why are people obsessed with it? I feel like they're getting it wrong, but what are they getting wrong? And so just looking at the world just made me have all these questions.
When you were here last time, we mostly talked about forgiving other people.
Yeah.
And we just barely touched on self-forgiveness. And I had a lot more thoughts on that, and it felt like something I wanted to dig into a lot more, and that's why we brought you back on to talk about that specifically. Do you think of self-forgiveness as something different from forgiving other people? Is that a different process, a different thing altogether? Do you make a distinction like that?
No, I don't think it's different. So for people who have yet to watch that episode, I define forgiveness very broadly. And so to forgive someone, you can let go of anger, or you can let go of contempt, or you can refrain from revenge, or a whole bunch of other kind of moral practices. But you do it for the purpose of either repair or reconciliation, relief or release. So there's a variety of moral practices and a variety of aims. I think when you apply that account to individuals or to the self, the only thing that changes is the object or the target of your forgiveness. So what does it mean for me to forgive myself? It could be the case that I let go of anger that I have towards myself so that I can have a sense of release and kind of repair myself. Or I can decide to stop beating up on myself and stop looking at myself as less than, having contempt for myself, so that I can go forward in the future with a sense of wholeness. So they're not different. It's just targeted towards different persons, which in the case of self-forgiveness, it is the self.
Well, there is a big difference, though. I mean, you write about it in the book, right? Like, the difference is that you got to live with yourself. Like, you got to get your ass out of bed every morning, and go about your life. And it's hard to do that if you're at odds with yourself. Like, does that make it different? The fact that you don't have to live with other people all the time, but you have to walk around in your own head.
Yeah. So
all
I think
the time.
And
so you almost have to forgive yourself.
Yeah, I agree. So I think another kind of important difference is not only is it targeted towards the self, but one of the things that I argue is that, when it comes to other people, we don't always need to forgive them. Right? There's other things that we can do in order to kind of reach repair.
But also, other people are annoying, and we're always like the righteous ones, right?
Yeah,
like, I mean, it's always other people fucking things up, right? We're the ones that.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the case that people needed to forgive Dylan Roof. You know what I mean? And in some circumstances, I would suggest that may be appropriate for some and inappropriate for others. But when it comes to the self, it's a kind of different scenario. Like you said, we live with ourselves. And the kind of consequences of not forgiving yourself kind of makes being you and living with you very difficult, but also quite destructive. And so as much as I say that we don't necessarily have to forgive others, I do believe, not today or not tomorrow, we do need to go about the work of forgiving ourselves because, as you say, we need to live with ourselves. And the only way to do that productively is to eventually forgive ourselves. Now, I do say eventually because, like forgiving others, forgiveness is a process. And you shouldn't do it too easily. You shouldn't do it too quickly. But eventually, I think for the individual, we need to ultimately forgive ourselves if we are to continue to live or to flourish. That is indeed necessary.
Well, what gives us the right to forgive ourselves? I mean, it is normally the victim, right, who has the right to forgive because the victim is the one that was wronged. So can I forgive myself when I'm the asshole?
So here's the thing. There are instances in which you are the assholes to other people, right? But we also need to kind of expand, I wouldn't say the notion of victims, but expand our notion of people who are impacted by wrongdoings. So let me just kind of make this clear by an example. It could be the case that I destroy a relationship by cheating on a person, for example. And so I violate the trust of that particular individual and hurt them in a very intense way. But as a result of doing that, I also destroyed a relationship that was good for me. And so I also have harmed myself very differently. It's a very different harm, a very different degree of suffering, but I also have harmed myself in that particular regard. So what would it mean to forgive myself? Well, I'm forgiving myself because I fucked up. Can I say the F word?
I think I've already done it like 4 times. So
well, we didn't say the F word though. I harmed myself by harming
I did.
I harmed myself by harming that particular person, right? So I would have the right to indeed do that. So that's what I mean by having the right. It's not necessarily that I harm myself, but when we harm other people, we also indirectly harm ourselves, right? And then we also, when we harm other people, particularly when it comes to our loved ones, we are invested in our loved ones, right? We make certain kind of commitments to our loved ones. And then when we harm them, we disrupt that. And what would make it the case that I would have the right to forgive myself in that case would be, well, I harmed someone that I care about. I harmed someone that I have invested in. So I kind of have impeded on my project, on my moral and loving project. I messed that up by harming that particular person. So in that sense, I will also have the right to forgive myself.
Support for the show comes from Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. The reality is that we're all susceptible to having our private information stolen, public figures and private citizens alike. Delete Me can help protect you and your family's personal privacy or the privacy of your business from doxing attacks before sensitive info can be exploited. Our colleague Claire White recently tried Delete Me.
Delete Me is a tool that anyone online should have in their back pocket. Delete Me has saved me not only hours of removing my data from online, but has saved me hours of worrying about who has their hands on my data and what they're doing with it.
Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/Vox and use promo code VOX at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/Vox and enter code VOX at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Vox, code VOX.
So I would say in my own life, I can be an asshole. And like often I find myself in the house, just day to day. Maybe I'm cranky. Maybe, I don't know, shit didn't go well at work that day, or maybe just got out of bed wrong. Maybe I'm just pissed off at the world. And I'll be an asshole. Or I'll be too short or too selfish. And like almost immediately I know that. And I feel like shit about it. And my wife and my son will like very quickly forgive me and move on. But those little like micro failures, when they happen, it really eats me up. I don't know, like I'm not the dad or the husband or the person I think I am.
So hearing you say what you just said, what that communicates to me is that you have certain kind of standards for yourself, right? And so you know what it is to be, you know what it is to be a good Sean, or you have standards of what it is to be a good dad, what it is to be a good partner, what it is to be a good Sean. And then you have the failure in which you don't live up to that particular standard. So not only have you let perhaps your family down, but you've also let yourself down. So in both those instances, you may have asked your family to forgive you, but now you have to figure out how to forgive yourself, right? Which is not forgiving yourself necessarily for the harm that you caused to them, but also forgiving yourself for not living up to the standards that you have for yourself. But there's also something else that's going on there. We can get frustrated with ourselves. And all that combined, even in the midst of the forgiveness, leaves something. It leaves residue. It leaves what philosophers call kind of a moral residue. And I think what is important for us to note here is that we think that after forgiveness, everything becomes all right. Right? We can just forgive and we can forget. Right? We can just wipe the slate clean. But particularly when it comes to ourselves, it's not that easy. So even after I've forgiven myself, my family members have forgiven me, I can still feel like an asshole. I can still have regret. I can still have remorse. And I would say, well, that's the remainders of wrongdoing. Regret is defined as kind of like this deep sorrow that we have as a result of our wrongdoing. And sometimes that can just last for like a week, or it can come and go. Or in the case of me not living up to the standards of what it is to be a good daughter, I can be minding my own business one day and just feel this pain of like, damn, I really messed up when my mother was alive. And that's what regret is. That's the residue of wrongdoing. The question is that a bad thing? It can be if we ruminate, over it. If we allow that to stop us from entering into relationships, or if we allow that to allow us to have kind of this obsessive self-reproach, it becomes a good thing. And Daniel Pink talks about this in his book, The Power of Regret, when we make use of it. And how do we make use of it? Learn from it. Feel the sorrow. Feel the pain. Let it remind you of your values. Let it remind you of your moral compass, but also allow it to motivate you to do better next time.
I think it's about shame for me. Do you think much about the distinction between guilt and shame and sort of like how that relates to forgiveness?
I think when we are shameful, we are ashamed of who we are, right? It's kind of an assessment of,
Right.
of who we
That's the
take
thing.
ourselves to be, our whole kind of personality or character. With guilt, we're disappointed in what we've done, not necessarily in who we are. And so just by that distinction alone, one has much more potential with taking us into a better future than the other, right? Shame, if you are, have a kind of negative response based on who you are, then there's no way out of that, right? Because you've already accepted who you are. You already have this kind of view of, I'm a horrible person, I'm a bad person. And there's much not redeem, you might even say, well, because I am a horrible person, I am irredeemable. But there's something quite different from I'm a horrible person to I did a horrible thing. And we can make room for redemption in that. It's like, okay, don't do that horrible thing anymore.
But isn't like the definition of being a horrible person someone who does horrible things? Like, what's the difference?
So now let's go back to Aristotle, of course. For Aristotle, what it is to have a character of something is that you must do it repeatedly. It does indeed become who you are. So horrible people do horrible things, but a person who's done a horrible thing is not necessarily a horrible person. All right. So that's what Aristotle would say. But here's the thing about the
What does Myisha say?
Myisha says that self-reproach, obsessive and irrational self-reproach, will have you think or make you believe that that is who you are. And we can beat up ourselves so much when we're beating ourselves up because we have accepted or we have been led to believe that that is who we are. So we have to beat ourselves up, beat that person up because they are what they are. And I think that's an irrational way to think about ourselves. What I believe a lot of the times, and this can change by context, that we are beings in the making, that we are a lot of things, and we do a lot of things, but a lot of things that we do really don't really define us. But it's so easy to beat ourselves up. It's so easy to do that.
Well, especially if you're the overthinking in your head too much type,
Yeah.
I think I'd say like most of the things I probably let myself off the hook for, certainly in the past and probably still now more than I care to admit. But, for me, it was like just not showing up for the people I care about because I was too involved with my own shit. Mm-hmm. I think I've gotten better about that. I hope I've gotten better about that, but I do feel a lot of shame for that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And of course, at the time, like everyone, I made a million different excuses for it. But it seems like a big deal because that sort of cuts to the heart of being a good friend or a good family member or a good partner or whatever, right? Like not showing up for people is sort of unforgivable, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a lot of things I want to say. The first thing I want to point to is your use of shame. And I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question. Right. I'm going to make a statement, and then I want to know what your response is. So my rhetorical question is shame what you actually felt? Okay. I said that guilt, you kind of make an assessment about something that you've done. So it's a response to people's anger, people's disappointment as a result of what you've done. And shame is in response to who you are. Guilt makes you want to repair, to reconcile, to fix things. But shame typically makes you want to hide. And so the reason why I'm posing a rhetorical question to you, Sean, is to say, how do you know it wasn't guilt, right? Did it make you want to hide? Or did it make you want to do better? Now, both of these things feel awful, makes you feel awful about yourself. So let's just put that to the side about how you felt about yourself. But right now I'm talking about what philosophers call the action tendency, right? What did you feel compelled to do? Did you feel compelled to kind of hide yourself? Or did you feel compelled to fix things or do better?
Well, it depends on how long the timeline is. Like eventually, I got to the place where I felt like I needed to change, and did. But it took a long while to get there, like an embarrassingly long while to get there. I think probably what I went through first was just a lot of denial.
Yeah.
But then at some point you just sort of, you can't not know what you know. And I think it was shame, although maybe you would call it guilt, because I had to sort of like reckon with the possibility that like maybe I'm not the guy I thought I was. Like maybe I am actually more selfish than I thought I was. And at some point we all lie to ourselves about ourselves all the time. Some more than others, but there are those moments where, I don't know, it's just sort of the foundation of the bullshit collapses, and you got to kind of look yourself in the mirror. And I got to that point, but it took a while to get there, like way longer than it should have. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of meandered a little bit, but did I answer your question?
Yeah,
or did that tell you anything about?
Yeah, you did.
About me?
You did. I'm a moral psychologist, not a psychologist. But okay, so in your instance, in the example that you just used, you say that it took you a while. Even if it takes you a while, I mean, that's what forgiveness and reconciliation is all about. It's a process. It always takes a while, right? But does that mean that what you did was unforgivable? Right. The fact that, let's just say you have forgiven yourself. We don't need to go down a therapy thing about you, Sean. But let's just say you have forgiven yourself. Let's just say that you have forgiven yourself. It just took a while. It doesn't necessarily mean that what you did or how you showed up was unforgivable. Right. And it's interesting that we're talking about the selfish stuff. And the reason why I'm kind of familiar with the features of selfishness is because I'm currently writing a chapter about selfishness, about a book that I'm working on. So, I'm keenly aware about what selfishness is, particularly because I also think that in my love relationships, I have been selfish and justified it and reasons that I felt was beneficial for everybody, right? I need to just focus on my career. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. First person in my family to have kind of like this income bracket. I have a responsibility to maintain this and leave some money. That's how I was justifying of, I can't go back to Mississippi for the Christmas because I need to work on my book, right? So all these justifications of my neglect, of my inconsistency, of me not being around for my family, has been justified I need to do my work. I need to do my work. And I've just come to the realization of just how freaking selfish that has been. That the book would not suffer if I go home for 3 days. Right? My academic or professional world would not fall apart if I call my niece every week. And coming to that realization and then being, you talk about shameful, really feeling awful about who I have been. And here's the interesting, Sean, you talk about therapy. Recognizing that I thought I learned a lot from neglecting my mother when she was alive. But here I am again, doing the same thing to my sister and my nieces and my nephew. And feeling horrible about that. But here's the thing. If I am to be better and to do better and really be a good family member, feeling shame ain't gonna do it. Right? Feeling guilt, yeah. Feeling remorse? Yeah. Feeling regret? Yeah. But I got to do something with all these feelings. And the question is, what do I do with this regret? What do I do with this remorse? What do I do with this disappointment? You try again, Myisha. You do better. So what are you going to do? I was just thinking about earlier today. I need to make it the case that my niece and nephew finally come to California so we can have a good time for a week. Work on that now. Right? That's the future. Like, let the regret do that kind of work. But the whole beating stuff up and ruminating over what you've done and just feeling awful, you feel awful for a reason. Do something with that. And that's what I'm working on.
I mean, not that there has to be a hierarchy of like of shamefulness here, but at least like that justification isn't as bad as mine, right? Like mine would be as bad sometimes as, I can't make that Thanksgiving family dinner because I want to go fucking ride my motorcycle with my friends.
But then you
like
say,
that,
well, self-care.
Man, I can't even, it's not like I got to finish my book or I got to get that tenure package, to pop. It's just even worse, right? So like,
No,
you said, is it
say,
unforgivable?
Sean, don't say
is
that.
anything?
Sean, don't say that. Because here we
Well,
are.
no, hold on.
We're doing the thing, right? We are
What are we
exemplifying
doing?
the very thing that we're diagnosing, which is irrational self-reproach. Right? You saying, "Oh, your explanation is what I'm doing is worse than you," and I think
I'm
that's
being irrational.
No, I didn't call you irrational. I said irrational self-reproach.
Okay.
Which is
I wasn't offended.
thinking,
I was just clarity.
which is
I was just getting
thinking
clarity.
that what you've done is worse. And that worse thing, right, is the thing that can keep us stuck. Right. And I also just want you to be gentle with yourself, because I think even though you look back and you say to yourself, well, what I actually wanted to do was to go ride motorcycles. I think in your thinking at that moment, perhaps, and you tell me if this is not the case or not, because I'm not also trying to give you an excuse. Is it just I want to go have motorcycles with my friend, or is it because I work so damn hard and I need a break? And perhaps you thought in that moment, if I don't get this break, I'm not going to be able to be of use to other people. Now, you could have been wrong about that. But you also could be wrong about the fact that it was just motorcycles. I think it was more than that. And does that not suggest that your priorities were still messed up? Perhaps. And I'm also not to make an excuse for you, Sean, because you could just be a horrible person. I don't.
Well, I mean,
we're just getting to know each other. I don't know. And I think there are some people who are horrible people. But we need to be very careful with assessing ourselves. And at the time, you may have thought that was the best decision. And then you think to yourself, oh, that was kind of selfish. And I'm more concerned about what we do for the future.
I do appreciate you like trying to throw me a rope and pull me out of my own shit, but I'm just being real. Like you asked, so I'll honestly answer. No, I don't think I had some. I don't think it was because of I worked too hard that week and I needed a break. I think I was just being selfish, and I wanted to go ride my motorcycle, right? But that's the shame part, right? Okay. Is it truly unforgivable? I don't know, but like if you have a duty to the people you love, it is to show up when they want you to show up, when they need you to show up. And if you don't do that, like you're just failing the most fundamental test, right? And I think if I could have justified it to myself in those terms that you suggested, I may not have felt shame about it to the extent that I did. I think I felt shame because I was just being an asshole.
Yeah.
Not because I was too tired or not because, some other like semi-noble reason. I was just being a bad person. And that's not okay. And that's why I felt shameful about it. I don't know if I ever forgave myself. I just stopped doing that. And then the rest sort of takes care of itself.
Yeah.
But anyway, I should have just taken the rope you threw me. But
No. Only you know you. And that's a good thing that you know yourself. It's a good thing that you know yourself.
You can know yourself too much. You have too much self-knowledge. I don't know. Sounds like you forgive me. I don't know if you have the right to forgive me, but
Well, I don't have the right to forgive you in that context.
All right. I don't know. Let me ask you something else here.
Can I put it aside? Can I put it aside, Sean? Can I make it aside?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what came to my mind when you said what you said. And we probably shouldn't, release this response. But I was listening to this podcast last night. And I don't know if I'm not going to say the person's name, but it was a famous physician. And this is the Epstein Files, which was just released. And the famous physician had wrote a book last year. And in the book, he talks about how there was a time in which his wife was having complications with their infant son. And he was out of town.
Is this Peter Tia?
Oh, shit, yeah. Yeah, you know exactly.
Yeah, no, we name names.
Okay. And he couldn't be there for them. He was out of town. And he didn't return back home until a week. And the podcaster were basically saying when the Epstein Files was released and the podcaster had read the book, the emails that was being exchanged with him and Epstein at a particular situation where he was talking about, hey, are you going to be around for New York? that it wasn't just that he had professional responsibilities of why he didn't get back to his wife and child. It was because he was hanging out with Epstein. And he talks about in his book, because he doesn't talk about the Epstein stuff or how he felt so bad and all this other stuff. And I think that's an example of, I can imagine, that's a lot of guilt there. The Epstein stuff made me think about, you should feel shameful, right? It seems like that's a degree until which not only did you not do it for professional reasons, it's like this other reason makes it the case that, that was a kind of a reflection of character and misaligned desires and priorities and all this other messy stuff. So that's what I was thinking when you mentioned your example, Sean, that it really does depend. It's not just the fact that you don't show up. Sometimes I really think that the reasons can vary in degrees that makes it the case with this reason, even if it's a selfish reason, warrants guilt. But this reason warrants shame.
I haven't always been the guy I want to be, but guess who's not in the Epstein files? This guy. You can control F that motherfucker as many times as you want. Healing is not going to pop up. So at least there's that. But okay, so that guy, he did that. Let's say he did that. Mm-hmm. All right, let's just take it for granted, or allegedly, if the legal people need me to say that, right? If he really did that, should he forgive himself for that? That seems. You asked me if anything is truly unforgivable. If that's not unforgivable, you got to tell me what is.
Yeah.
Or what isn't.
Yeah.
That's a lot worse than just going to ride your motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be tough. If I'm just putting myself in.
Would you forgive him? What if that was your husband? Yeah.
Oh, if that came out, I would have been gone. Because here's the thought that I was thinking as I was listening to the podcast, and I was driving at the time, so I knew exactly what exit I was at. My thought was, if she's just hearing this today, this changes the relationship. Like this fundamentally changes who you took your husband to be. It seems like the degree of the reason, depravity-wise, because now we've gotten to the depravity, really makes you think, is this who you are? And then that calls for some other kind of work and introspection. And reasons to indeed feel shame. And let me just also say this, for a lot of people may say, well, Myisha's pro-guilt and she doesn't think shame is warranted. I do think shame is important. And I think, particularly in our political context, I think people need to feel more shameful.
Support for the gray area comes from Mint Mobile. Generally speaking, most of us like our money. Unfortunately, big wireless companies also like your money, and it seems like they're always coming up with new and innovative ways to get it. Mint Mobile says they exist to make sure you're not overpaying on your wireless bill. They offer a premium wireless plan for just $15 a month. All of their plans come with high-speed 5G data and unlimited talk and text. Plus, you can keep your same phone and the existing number. It only takes a few minutes to activate your eSIM, and you can start saving immediately. You can ditch your overpriced wireless plan and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for just $15 a month. If you like your money, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/gray area. That's mintmobile.com/gray area. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month, 5 gigabyte plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Support for the show comes from Quince. If you've been looking in your closet recently and seeing all sorts of clothes you can't even remember buying, or worse, clothes you do remember buying and thinking, oh yeah, I can definitely pull this off, now may be a great time for a reset. Instead, you can fill that closet with durable, evergreen pieces with Quince that last year after year. Quince makes high-quality, everyday essentials using premium materials like 100% European linen and their insanely soft, moisture-wicking, and anti-odor flow knit active wear fabric. I've tried Quince myself. I've gotten several shirts and sweaters. They're all great. I wear them all the time. I even got a backpack for my last trip that held up really, really well. And just the other day, I actually ordered a silver chain because it was such a good deal. I'm not even a chain guy. But I'm also neck deep in a midlife crisis, so I'm trying things out. I'll keep you updated. Anyway, Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Don't wait. Go to quince.com/gray area for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/gray area to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/gray area.
If you are someone who, for whatever reason, can't forgive yourself, what does your life look like? How do you go on?
I don't think you can really go on. And when I say living, I'm talking about living in the Aristotelian sense of flourishing. Flourishing in the sense in which your moral life is good, your psychological life is good, your relationships with other people are good. And I think that when you don't forgive yourself, one of those areas are impacted in ways that doesn't really allow you to live the full life that you're capable of living.
Is there a simple test in the end for knowing whether you're forgiving yourself or just letting yourself off the hook without actually sort of taking stock of what you did, which seems like a precondition for not doing it again?
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about the extremes, right? Beating ourselves up, obsessing over what we've done, living with the shame, guilt, etc. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is just saying, I forgive, hey, I forgive myself after the very next day after doing this horrible thing. So there's ways in which we can do it too quickly. And, I don't have an issue with people who move fast, but if you move fast and you're forgetting steps, then that's problematic. I think if you forgive yourself too quickly without taking stock of things, without a full recognition of what you've done and an understanding of how you've hurt other people and also hurt your own life, without a kind of a guide of, okay, how can you do better? Can you, without, so that's one thing, right? So if you do it too quickly, then you probably know that that's a problem. But I also think that if you do it in ways in which you allow yourself to forgive yourself because you kind of minimize the harm, where you basically say, well, what I did wasn't really that bad, so I forgive myself, right? That's problematic. But another way in which it can be problematic is you begin to say, well, yeah, it was my fault, but, if they didn't, or if they would have, right? So if you engage in victim blaming, then, that's probably not what you want to do. And here's another thing. If you basically say, you know what? I know I messed up, but look what came out of this, right? I call it the greater good theory, right? Basically suggesting that, you allows you to forgive yourself or have no regret because you think to yourself, something came out of this, wonderful. So I don't have to really have the responsibility of the wrongdoing because everything works out for the good. If this, I think those are all problematic. We don't want to go down that direction. So if you're doing any of that stuff, then I would say stop all that erroneous justification. I would say sit with what you've done. Hear how what you've done have impacted others. Try to figure out how you can do better. Repent, confess. And if you're doing those kinds of things, then I think you're going in the right direction.
Do you have any advice, practical advice for people, that are just maybe stuck in the guilt and shame part and haven't quite managed to move on to the constructive action part?
One of the things I would say is that when it comes to wrongdoing and what happens after wrongdoing, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that can't be undone. We think that we can recreate things out of the destruction that we cause to ourselves. That is to say, we think that if we beat ourselves up enough, things will get better, or we can rewrite a wrong. And I want to suggest, no matter how many times you beat yourself up, you can never undo what you've done. But that's not the end of the story. The good news is, if you learn from what you've done And if you vow to do better, then you can recreate a better world. I want to say for people who are struggling to forgive themselves, I want to say to them that you are not what you've done, that you are still worthy of dignity and respect, that you are worth your own self-love. And that means you're also worth a second chance, and you're worth a new beginning. And to begin to see yourself in that particular way can make way for self-forgiveness.
I'm going to leave it right there. Before you go, I want to read our credits. New episodes of The Gray Area drop on Mondays. Listen and subscribe. The show is part of Vox. Support Vox's journalism by joining our membership program today. Go to vox.com/members to sign up. And if you decide to sign up because of this show or Myisha, let us know. Myisha, where can people go to read your work or listen to your pod or just follow you?
Well, every essay, academic and public, that I've ever written is on my website, myishacherry.org. You can also find me, be inconsistent on social media at Myisha Cherry. But also, I have a new season of the Unbeat podcast that's coming out at the end of February 2026. And so if you want to catch those episodes in which I talk to philosophers about the social and political issues of our day, it is available wherever you listen to your podcast.
Myisha Cherry, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. You are so much fun to talk to. And I just, there are not enough, I think I may have told you this last time you were on the show. There are just not enough academic philosophers who even care about actually engaging with the public and like writing for the public in ways that can actually be understood. And I love that about you. And you're such a good sport. And I'd love for you to come back on for a third time if you'll have us at some point.
Thanks so much for those words, Sean. And so good to see you and talk with you again.
Hey, thanks for watching. Every week we bring honest and nuanced conversations about what's happening in culture, tech, and the world of ideas to your video and audio feeds. Episodes of The Gray Area drop every Monday and Friday on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite listening app. Comment below and let me know what you thought of this conversation. I promise I won't be offended. You can also send us an email at thegrayarea@vox.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 1-800-214-5749. And if you enjoy what we do, please help support Vox by joining our community on Patreon at patreon.com/Vox. Thanks again.